podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Hello everyone and welcome to How Are The Podcast. It's Gav and you join us the day after Sunderland's defeat on the road at Oxford. Unfortunately, with a loss, we're not going to drag you through the trenches. I know Chris promised on the reaction pod this would be an extended reflection of the game. I don't think it will be, to be honest. I think the lads on the reaction pod, Chris and Johnny, they did a fantastic job of going through the match and bringing together some feelings. To stay that composed after a game is difficult, and they did it. So first off, if you didn't listen to that, make sure you catch up on it. Today, we're probably going to look at the bigger picture. I think we've got a big week coming up, and there's quite a lot going on, and a lot to reflect on based on recent results and things. And we're just trying to get our heads around where we're at. First off, joining me, I've got Martin with us again. Hello, mate.
Hello, Gav. Yeah, we don't really want to relive a kick-by-kick, blow-by-blow review of the game on Saturday. There wasn't much to really talk about, but plenty of bigger picture issues, as you say, to consider, I think.
Absolutely. And making his, it's not a debut because he was on the reaction pod with me the other week, but his debut in terms of sitting on this call with us and doing a proper long form pod is Brett. Hello, mate.
Hello, mate. Yeah, I'm excited to be here. It feels like I'm on the Sunday supplement. I'm expecting you to start picking up pictures of the Echo headlines. Martin sat there with croissants. It's good to be here.
I thought I'd brushed the crumbs off there.
Seeing I was actually at Oxford yesterday, I'm so pleased we're not going to talk that much about it.
Yeah, on the Sunday supplement thing, I think that's a good summary of what these Sunday pods have become, Martin, aren't they? We were just chatting about this before we recorded. It's the reaction pods. We get them out straight after the game, and it's a reflection. But these Sunday pods we've been doing are a bit like an episode of Sunday supplement, aren't they? We're a bit more considered, I would say, than trying to react to a game immediately.
Well, that's right. We've had a little bit of time to sleep on it and reflect on things, and in life things are generally better after you've had a bit of a sleep on it. So same goes for football.
I haven't had much sleep. I was out last night and all day. I went out for the match, and I think I've had about 3 hours kip. So the fact I'm able to string words together today is impressive, I think. Brett, so you were at the game. We've got to ask you about it. You were there. You were in the crowd. You were you were in there in the zone in the away end. What was it like yesterday? What was the atmosphere and the mood like?
Do you know what? It was flat yesterday. It started off positive, and as the game went on, and we were seeing what we were watching, it did get flatter and flatter. And I think, sort of coming out of it myself, I wasn't angry. I wasn't angry. I was disappointed. What we saw. I was working out on the way home. In the last 18 days, I was at Norwich. I went up for Swansea, and now this, and obviously other people have been to the Blackburn and Bristol City games in between, and it isn't great. And I can understand the fans' frustration at the moment. Obviously, we're talking about the bigger picture, though. Would I have celebrated a win yesterday as much as I'd celebrate a win at Wembley? Of course not. But it during the second half, one thing, a really key fact, thing that made me think that it was flat was where normally in the away end, we've got a really, really good away support. We sell out everywhere we go, even when there's been time. I've been at games and we've been relegated that day, and the fans have non-stop sang. When normally the opposition will sing a song that Oxford starts singing their version of "We're by far the greatest team," we'll overtake that song and sing it about Sunderland. They were singing the second half their version of the Chris Riggs song, and there was nothing from the Sunderland fans, I think, because we were just so flat at what we were watching. And it does make, I'm sure about going forward in the pod anyway, but it makes the QPR game for me massive, just to get the fans back on side, because it does feel a bit like that at the moment. But bigger picture stuff, it was just a poor game to go to. It really was.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point that Brett's just made there, Martin, about the QPR game. I was So just, before I was getting ready to do this pod, and I was in the shower thinking about what we would chat about and stuff. And I was thinking, actually, the game next weekend, I think they almost have to win just to. There is a real problem at the minute with the general mood around the playoffs, and the club have clearly noted it because, off the record type thing, they've reached out to us to do some bits and pieces in the build up to the playoffs with them, around just sort of trying to hype the game up and things. And I think there's a recognition widely, ourselves, everyone can say there's definitely an issue with the mood going into this, and that's obviously offset by the results recently. It's not, you've just pasted there in the chat there some things that Dan Neil has said after the game, and he said we haven't became a bad team overnight. We haven't comfortably finished fourth and been disappointed about not giving up the top two and all the rest of it. There is a recognition that we are a great team. We are. You don't finish fourth and finish fourth comfortably if you're not good. However, the last, whatever it's been since the international break, there has quite clearly been a change in the mood. And yeah, I just almost think that this QPR game coming up, it's not a must win, but I just think it would make a massive, massive difference to how people feel if we can get 3 points and go into the playoffs with at least that, than as opposed to just losing another game and that have been 5 on the bounce and obviously everything that comes with that. That's going to really affect the whole sell of the playoffs, isn't it? Just saying to people like, we can actually do this, come to the game, get behind the lads. I think that QPR game's going to have a big say in how we feel.
I think it is, and it's going to be, I think it's performance rather than results as well, isn't it? I think if you look at the run that we've had over the past few weeks, I think, since the international break, obviously coming in off the back of the Coventry away game where we got turned over, we actually had a couple of positive results, didn't we? After that, we had the Millwall at home game and then West Brom away. But we didn't play particularly well in either, but I thought we looked a bit sharper and switched on and really ready to tackle this run-in. And then we've had these 4 games, or 5 games subsequently. I think it was Norwich was after West Brom, wasn't it? Where we've started making changes, and some of the changes have been out of choice. A lot of them have been enforced because we've needed to rest players, we've needed to work Lafayette. Again, Mundell's obviously been injured and stuff like that. But we haven't looked sharp. And, you can talk about, us not winning games and not scoring goals. But, if the keeper was having a blinder every week and we were peppering the goal with shots and we were being a bit unlucky, that's a lot easier to buy, isn't it, than having no attempts on goal like we had yesterday. And I think, yesterday kind of summed it up. Now, I think, Chris and Johnny talked a lot about it in the reaction pod, where Le Bris it's kind of almost set it up, didn't he? In terms of going, right, now we've got our sights set in the playoffs. Now you're gonna see the real Sunderland. And, you've kind of got to back that up to a large extent, haven't you? And the game against Oxford was just more of the same. We didn't look mentally sharp. We didn't look mentally tuned in. The goals that we scored were lazy. Sorry, goals that we conceded were lazy goals to concede in terms of mentality. And it wasn't about skill or talent or being outdone with a great bit of play. It was poor mentality. And I think, it's not the results or that really concerns me. I think you can cope with the results, going against you at this stage of the season, at this stage of where we're at, because whether we could have stuffed Oxford 7-0 yesterday and it would not change anything in this season, apart from we'd have 3 more points on the board. It wouldn't affect the playoffs or the outcome of the playoffs. But you're kind of looking at you want to see signs of hope. You want to see signs of things to cling on to in the performance. And I just think, as kind of Brett said about the crowd, on the field, it's flat. And, those two things have always been, symbiotic, haven't they? They always play off against each other. Sometimes the team needs a crowd to get the team G'd up, and vice versa. The crowd often needs a team to get the crowd G'd up. And neither was happening, and neither's been happening for the last few weeks. And, there's a large part of me, yes, you're looking forward to that QPR game, and you're going, a nice 3-0 win, Isidore getting a couple of goals and Lefebvre getting a lovely free kick or whatever would set everything up perfectly. We haven't won by 3 goals for months, have we? So that's highly unlikely to happen. But there's a big part of me that's glad the first leg of the playoffs is away, because I think coming back to the Stadium of Light with a second leg to play, hopefully with the game nicely poised for us to go on and win. I think in that scenario, everything else becomes irrelevant because it's a one-off cup tie, isn't it? If you play the first leg at home, you remember Portsmouth when we were in League One? We had the first leg of that game at home, and that was a pretty low crowd, wasn't it?
It was actually the lowest crowd of the season.
Which
nobody was bothered about being there. It was because we'd chucked away automatic promotion. So very different set of circumstances to this, but still people were flat.
Now you're kind of looking at how we've done this season, and we've almost been a victim of our own success to some extent as well, because you could have had exactly the same results, but just in a different order, and we'd be going into this last game and the playoffs absolutely buzzing, because we climbed up there, got a playoff place. So
100% right there, Martin. You're 100% right. Because we did start the season like we came out of the traps so quick.
No, well, we did. We were up there for probably 5 or 6 weeks. We were pretty much clear, weren't we? And then the teams who've got the parachute payments and the 20 million quid players, just chipped away and that gap closed. But it's there's so many bits to pick out. It's kind of hard to know where it's at, because you can't actually blame anybody for feeling a bit low with Sunderland at the minute, because we're not. It's that thing where as a fan you bounce off what you see on the field, and we haven't seen much over the last few weeks to really get excited about. So you have to cling on to the bigger picture to give you that hope and give you that little sense of what's gone on over the last 5 or 6 weeks ultimately is actually kind of irrelevant.
Yeah. The mood at the minute, Brett, obviously is, as was said, flat. People are not. There are a lot of fans who just aren't in the heads. Well, I like to think with us, we do focus on the bigger picture quite a lot on these podcasts. So ultimately, that's what's kept me grounded in the last, God knows how many weeks when we've been losing games, and you can see what we're trying to do in terms of rotating the players, and you can kind of explain away the lack of intensity in the games because obviously the players are looking after themselves. But as I said before, there is a real issue, I think, with how we are mentally going into these games. And I talk about that QPR match, but in between now and the QPR match, the players are going off to Portugal for warm weather training, which I don't know how far in advance that's been planned, but to me feels like a team bonding exercise. It's something you do to get the lads away together, bonding. They're probably going to have a night out, let their hair down a bit and have some drinks and all the rest of it. And also, you listen to Chris Mepham's interview after the game, and he alluded to the fact that there'd been a bit of a Barney in the dressing room, at least, people pointing the finger and shouting and blaming at half time and things like that. It just doesn't point to us being in a great place. Like, and my mood has not changed at all when it comes to how we've decided to navigate this. I still think we've done the right thing. I think rest and rotation being prioritised above everything else is the right approach, will be the right approach. And even if we don't win the playoffs, it gives us the best possible chance to get there with a fully fit squad that can compete in what could be really, intense, grueling games against other teams who maybe haven't had that opportunity. I still think that's the right approach. I'll not be changed on that. I think we've done the right thing. But, you hear these things, they're going away to warm weather training camps. There's been a bit of an issue in the dressing room in terms of obviously not happy with how we conceded the goals at Oxford. Yourself at the Oxford game, you're saying the mood was flat and people have turned up and, they're not there excited about what they're watching. And it's been the same at the Stadium of Light the last few weeks. Hand up, the last home game, me and my mates, and I've never done this. We walked in the ground 10 minutes before kick-off, we got a pint and we just stood and watched the game for half an hour. rather than go to our seats because we just weren't bothered. It's just a weird place to be, isn't it, in terms of the headspace where we are at the minute?
It is. It's a really strange place at the moment. And it's almost a little bit like playing Oxford yesterday was probably not the best team to play against who were at the time fighting for their lives. Now, obviously, 30 minutes before our kickoff, they've just seen Luton beat Coventry, so they need to win. So all of a sudden you have got one team that's absolutely scrapping for everything and one team, as you say, that's, although they are now in playoff mode, they're still not going to risk it. So, had we been playing like the QPR game yesterday and, we've got nothing to play for, it could have been a different outcome. The players could have actually, expressed themselves a bit more because Oxford came out of the traps straight away. We were on the back foot within the first couple of minutes. So it is a difficult one. Obviously QPR next week have nothing to play for. They are literally on the beach. You talk about Metham saying that there are arguments in the dressing room. You can then flip that around and say, well, actually, it shows the players care and they're fighting for it. You see players fighting on the training pitch and the managers love it because it shows that they want it. So, we've not turned bad overnight, as Daniel says. It's I just think Saturday. You say it's not must win, but I actually think it is must win. I think it is a must win game now on Saturday, just to get everyone back on side.
Well, it's not technically a must-win, is it?
Well, it's not technically, Martin. But from a fan's point of view, and I want to, you turn up on Saturday, wanting to be entertained, wanting to see something, and it's, they've got to, they do the fact that the players have got to look at themselves and do something.
It's funny because when I saw the Luton Coventry result, I was chuffed because I thought, right, if we want a proper serious game to get into playoff mode, this is now it.
I said the exact same thing.
They need to win.
I said the same thing to my dad. Was when the goal went in, I said that's actually brilliant because that means we're going to have a proper match now.
Yeah,
and
we should
be wrong.
Well, in terms of the actual, again, if you kind of look at it on the positive side of things, which we kind of try to do whenever but. If they had been on the beach, right, and QPR would be on the beach, and we'd had a 1-0 win yesterday, then, we get a 1-0 win on Saturday, you don't have this situation that's occurred after this game, right? Because we've had this game yesterday where, and probably, Blackburn, I know Blackburn I actually fancy Blackburn for that last playoff place, by the way, when you're looking at the results. But, Blackburn last week, when they went into that game, they had an outside chance to playoffs, but they didn't have a great deal to play for. Swansea haven't had much to play for. Norwich haven't had much to play for. So this run of games that we've had, it's only been Bristol City who we've played, really, that have had something to play for in this little last sort of 4 or 5 games. So, you could have got yourself into a bit of a comfort zone if we won 1-0 at Oxford and they'd had an out to play for. If we beat QPR 1-0 and they've got an out to play for, this scenario wouldn't have happened where the players are digging each other out. And you could even see it on the field. There was a few times where the camera panned to somebody and somebody was having a right go at another person for not closing down or getting the foot in or tracking back or whatever it was. And if that game had been different, that might not have occurred. So, the hope is that this has actually been a really big wake-up call because, as I said, when, both of us thought it, when the Luton goal went in, the game was set up for Oxford to win. If Oxford win, they stay up. And that makes it a massive game. And we should have, before the game, gone, right, they are going to come at us. We need to treat this as a proper warm-up for the away leg of the playoffs. Because this is as close as we're going to get to it. And as never mind the first few minutes they came at us, we had kickoff and they had a bloody shot within 20 seconds. So they were on top of us straight away and we could not deal with it. And, they weren't doing anything difficult or out of the ordinary. They were just closing us down. They were working hard, forcing us back. And the amount of times we went back and back and back, which is kind of unlike us because we normally are pretty good at kind of soaking up that style of pressure. And when teams come at us and press, we hit them over the top. And, I know Chris and Johnny again talked about yesterday when they were saying about the long balls, we just reverted to hoofing it. And it was so far away from what we've seen for the vast majority of the season that you really have to hope that that's like a massive reset. And this week away, they're going, fuck, we need to get back to what we were doing. This is what we were doing, and come back into that QPR game, really focus on what they're doing. Because I just thought mentally we looked slack, we looked weak. The passes weren't right. I think the pitch was crap, by the way. The amount of people who bloody slipped or the ball got stuck in the pitch and stuff like that. But
it was just made it look really dry. I thought it was weird.
It just looked, yeah, it was. But it's the same for both sides, and they coped with it well, didn't it? But I thought we just weren't mentally at the races. And I made this point in the piece on the site this morning. I've got absolutely no concerns with us getting to that first leg of the semi-final fit. Our players will be at match fitness. Whether we are mentally ready for that is a different question altogether. And if we were playing that tomorrow, I would be concerned.
That's the gamble we've taken, isn't it? And that was.
I don't think it is, Gav. I think that's the kind of the gamble that we've taken is, yes, you might sacrifice a couple of results or performances for fitness, but the mental attitude that you come into a game with is not dictated by that. It's not dictated by the players who are playing, because that squad of players, it's only a small squad, and any player who's got a chance of coming in should be thinking, fuck, if I play well here, I've got a chance of getting into the team for the semi. The chances are there, and I just think there's a mentality issue rather than anything else.
Yeah, there's been no players have come. There's no players have come into that team and look like I want to fight for a place here, and that's been really disappointing.
It hasn't it, and that's to me that's a worrying sign, because you've had people like Alexic come in. We've talked all day long about Tommy Watson, but if you look at some of the performances yesterday, if Tommy Watson had put in the performance that Isidore or Dan Neil or Trey Hume or anybody like that had put in yesterday, he'd be getting hauled over the coals again, because you put 2 and 2 together and you get 4 or 5, depending on what your viewpoint is. So I think, this is a massive reset week for us. And as I say, I think the fact that we had a game like we had against Oxford, and Oxford came out with the approach that they had to, because they had to win, will hopefully be a massive kick up the arse for us. And it kind of resets that group, because, as I say, if they'd had nothing to play for, we could have snuck a 1-0 win, and everyone goes, oh, it's fine. And hopefully this has identified something that's not quite fine. And, Dan Neil's talked about it here, saying, a lot of things were laid on the line. They stayed in the dressing room for ages after the game and had it out with each other. Mepham said at half-time and full-time they were at each other. And hopefully that's actually been a really productive exercise outside of what went on the pitch, because you've got to take that.
I think going to Portugal is actually a good thing. I think getting away
from the noise. Yeah.
Get away from all the noise. I think that's actually a really good thing. If we lose on Saturday, everyone will think it was a terrible thing to do. But I think getting away from it could be a really, really good thing for them. They say they can reset mentally to go again.
Yeah, I do agree with that. I almost think it's needed. I don't know how far in advance this has been planned with the whole trip to Portugal and all that. But I think more so just getting them away from, because this probably sounds daft, because they're so fortunate to be professional footballers who get. You watch that video the club put out through the week with the chefs, and you see the quality of the food they get and stuff like that, and you just think, bloody hell, must be amazing being a footballer. But being around the training ground every day, doing the same things, particularly at the back end of the season, it probably does get repetitive, and almost, you're just going through the motions every day, and maybe, I hadn't really considered that point about this being a kick up the arse, but I think you bang on. I think it's almost needed, because as I said before, we can explain away the results prior to this one, because for me, it was completely about rest and rotation, and almost you can excuse the switching off at times of the players who are probably going to start in the playoffs, because you think, well, they've probably been told not to go full-blooded into things, or at least the chatter around the games has almost landed in the heads, and they're like, right, I need to look after myself today. I'm not going to, maybe go full-blooded into this or whatever, So you can almost explain that away, but with this one, and you brought up before, Martin, the manager actually, I think he put a bit of pressure on himself, and Chris said this on the reaction pod. He put a bit of pressure on himself by coming out and saying that we were almost going to take this game more seriously. And it didn't, to me, whilst the team selection was definitely more serious. I look at the team, Patterson, Yelder, O'Neill, Mepham, Hume, Neil, Bellingham, Lefebvre, Rigg, Roberts, Isidore. That is the strongest team he probably could have picked without, starting Sirkin, who was obviously recovering from an injury, and et cetera, and might end up being injured and all the rest of it. So the team selection indicated that there was a seriousness about this occasion, but there was nothing in the performance that indicated it was serious. And I'm almost a little bit concerned that happened, because I just think we've excused all of these things in the last few weeks, and we were all waiting just to, okay, now we'll see a more serious performance. And, Oxford just wanted it simply more than we did. And yeah, we're not in the same headspace as them, because they've got something to fight for. But it disappoints us that a group of players who have got a big couple of weeks coming up didn't take that game very seriously, or it didn't feel like they did.
Do you think Le Bris's comments were actually directed at the players? Because I actually think that was him going, actually putting pressure on the players rather than putting pressure on himself. And, whether he's seen something over the past few weeks that he's not quite happy with or what, but to me, that was a kind of a public declaration in terms of drawing a line in the sand, laying it down, going, right, you lot need to take this seriously now. And look, there's so many things that go on behind the scenes that we don't know about, right? So we can sit here and look at the performances, read in between the lines, make some assumptions, some of which will be correct and some of which will be incorrect. And, put two and two together and sometimes get 4, sometimes get 5. But there's other factors at play as well. And you've got, without starting a whole load of rumours and negativity about stuff as well, how many of these players do we think will be here after the transfer deadline in the end of August or start of September? The chances are, like, Dan Neil's contract's running down. He hasn't signed a new contract. Job's likely to be going off. There's rumours about Chris Rigg, all these sort of things. All these things are going to be playing in people's minds as well. So they're going into these relatively meaningless games. And we've seen it with Tommy Watson, regardless of what anyone else says, he didn't pass the eye test in terms of, getting stuck in, working hard, throwing himself into situations, did he? There was situations yesterday where, it could be players looking after themselves just for the playoffs, or it could be something broader. But, there was that opportunity yesterday where Isidore got sprung by Patterson, and Isidore was like running in treacle. And 4 or 5 months ago, he would have been 2 or 3 yards ahead of that centre half. And he just, whether he's going, I don't want to risk a hamstring or whatever it is, but there's just that bit that's stopping. And, Chris and I talked to Martin Smith last week, and he was kind of saying, as a footballer, it's almost that intangible bit where if you're playing for something that matters, if you're going out and you've got 90 minutes to achieve something, it's that intangible thing that gives you an extra 10% in your performance, and you can't actually replicate it. You can't replicate it in a friendly or in a meaningless game. It's just there as default. And, none of us have been professional footballers, but we've all played football at different levels. And if you're playing in the cup final, you're given more than you are in a pre-season friendly. And it's human nature, isn't it? It's standard sort of stuff. So there's all of these other factors that would be going on around the group as well. And, again, hopefully we see a step up for QPR. But, what you have to hope is that when it comes to the first leg of the semi, that we have that noticeable step up, because the other teams around us likely will too. But it's a really difficult one to kind of put your finger on and make some sort of definitive, or get some definitive answers, because we only know so much.
Yeah. The other thing as well I want to touch on briefly, Brett, is when you look at the teams around us. So obviously Sheffield United ahead of us, they've completely thrown away the automatic promotion race, and they're going to be in the playoffs, and they got themselves a win at the weekend. But then, as well as ourselves losing, Bristol City lose, Coventry have now lost the last 2, Borough have dropped away, big style, West Brom are completely out the picture, and Martin said before, you look at Blackburn and Millwall out of nowhere now, are both, one of them could finish 5th. It's going that way, and we had we had Ian on, the Blackburn fan, for the preview the other week, and he was adamant they would be nowhere near the playoffs. He said the Opta had released a stat, and they basically had like a 2% chance of finishing in the top 6, and they're a point off. So they're on a crazy run of results, and you've got teams coming in with momentum below us. But at the same time, whilst we're Sunderland fans, all we care about is our team. We're not bothered about really what goes on elsewhere. However, there's going to be fans at the game on Saturday probably looking at their phone as much as they are the pitch, trying to see what's going on elsewhere, because Bristol City have, with that defeat, that's up in the air with them. Coventry, as I said, have lost the last 2. So all of a sudden now, there's teams around us who are lacking momentum too. It's not just a Sunderland thing. And it's just, isn't it just a weird situation, this? I'm really struggling to gather myself on how I should actually feel about this, because other teams are in the same boat as us, going through similar sort of feelings.
It's really bizarre, isn't it? It's like last weekend, it's like no teams seem to want to go up. Everyone seems to have got quite happily been around the top 10 in the Championship, and that will do them. Obviously, a similar thing happened to us when we got to the playoffs a couple of years ago, when we got in on the last day, beating Preston North End, and I think it was actually Blackburn and Millwall that day. I think Blackburn were 3-0 up, I think, and then lost 4-3 or drew 3. I can't remember what the score was, but
they chucked it. Yeah.
But yeah, they chucked it away, and we snuck in literally on the last day. So, and I think we started today about 9th, I believe, if I remember rightly. So it does happen. And then obviously you talk about momentum, and then we got knocked out to Luton. So it is a bizarre situation. It's why I think everyone loves the Championship, because it's, every team can beat any team. We saw obviously yesterday we lose to Oxford, Coventry lose to Luton. So it's it is a funny league. It's when it comes to the playoffs, you've asked the question a few times: does momentum matter? And we're going into without any. Someone else might come in, like Blackburn, sneak in. They're going to be absolutely buzzing. Does it mean anything? We don't really know. So it is a difficult one. It's a really funny one, but obviously why it makes the Championship great. And come the last day of the season, there's still 6 or so teams that are still playing for something. So it does mean, but you're guaranteed that most people watching that match on Saturday will be checking their phones for other scores without a shadow of a doubt.
But I think that's a really important point, Gav, about, the other teams around us, because, as you say, we often get so laser focused on what we're doing that you actually don't pay that much attention to what's going on around you. And you shared a stat before, Bristol City, Coventry and Middlesbrough, between them have taken 1 point out of the last 15 that have been available. Bristol City go to Leeds tomorrow. So, the odds are that'll be 1 point out of 18 that those 3 teams are taken. So it's not as if anybody else is going in with brilliant form or anything like that. They're all kind of staggering to the finishing line, but they've all got something to play for. They've all got those last 2 playoff places to try to get, which we've had sealed for 3, 4, 5, 6, however many weeks. So, it's dead easy to look at ourselves and go, shit, everything's crap. We're playing terribly. The world's ending. And you look around you, if, who would you rather be, a Bristol City fan now, or a Borough fan, or a Coventry fan, or, going into that last game? Because, the fixtures are really interesting, because Borough play Coventry on the last day of the season. So that's a monumental game, potentially. And then you've got Sheffield United playing Blackburn. Now, if you're Sheffield United, if Blackburn win, there's a very good chance you'll be playing them over 2 legs in the playoffs. And would you rather play, if you're Sheffield United, would you rather play Blackburn than play the other teams that have been around there? So, there's all these other little sort of storylines that'll be bubbling under, which could make for a really interesting sort of last day of the season. And as you say, I think people will be on the phones at the match looking at results. So you've got one screen set up over here, one screen set up over there to keep an eye on what's going on, because there's all sorts of dynamics at play to see how the season finishes up. But the reality is, apart from unless Blackburn do get in, and Millwall are away at Burnley as well, so you'd kind of think that they're not going to pick up any more points with the way that Burnley have been going. So again, it's dead easy to think that everybody else is kind of doing a bit better than we are, but the reality is that they're not.
And you look at those, obviously Martin's just read the fixtures out there, but you look at those teams around us, Brett, and with them having things to play for, you do have to wonder, don't you, how much of a toll that's going to take on them from a fitness perspective? Because as we've noticeably dropped off in terms of intensity, it's because we're trying to make sure we've got as fit a squad as possible for at least 2 games, whereas everybody else has got stuff to play for, right? So, you've got to wonder, haven't you, just how much that's going to actually take its toll on these teams when it comes, because you mentioned before about and we've talked about this a few times recently, but by the time we got to play Luton a couple of years ago, we were absolutely done in. And
you took the words out of my mouth then, Gav. That's really annoying. I was literally about to say that. We literally went into the Luton game with no defence because we've been pushing it so hard to get into the playoffs. So that will take a massive toll on them. So in a week's time, these conversations we're having now and these worries that we've got, 2 weeks' time, could be completely irrelevant because we've got a full, fresh team and they're all absolutely knackered.
Yeah, I'm trying to remain positive, Martin, on all of this, as I always do. But I can kind of understand why people are feeling really negative. I mean, I'll just to share a story with everyone. I watched the game in town yesterday. I'll not name the pub because I might out them as broadcasting live games at 3:00 and what have you. But I was in a pub in town watching the game. We had a booth in front of a TV, and because we had a TV around, we were just surrounded by people who came in to watch the game, right? And honestly, this was at like 0-0, a couple of minutes into the game. Just unbelievable negativity about everything. This player's shite, Daniel's shite, 09 shite. This player doesn't care. He's crap. We're crap. We'll not get a point. One bloke actually said this team will not get a point in the Premier League. And I'm thinking, just, you're watching the game, mate. It's 0-0. But I am a bit concerned about this. And as I touched on at the very start, I think the club are aware of it because the atmosphere at games recently has been really poor. How do we? Is that almost as important as what goes on the pitch? The fact that teams with momentum, as has been proven, don't always go up, right? But what you do need is you need everybody on side. You need the fans to buy into it. You need the players to buy into it. It helps, build up the games as occasions and lifts the importance almost of them. Is that an actual issue? Do you think that let's say we don't beat QPR? How much of an impact could that have on even just something as we talked about before, the Portsmouth game back in League One, where people had really given up because we chucked the automatics? How important is it that they find ways to get the fans on side over the next couple of weeks?
It's a really difficult thing to do, though, Gav. You can do the hashtag to the end. You can have the red and white cards held up before the match. You've got the dramatic music going, and you've got the light show and the foghorns going, and then the match starts. And then if it's the team then at that point, and again, this is what Martin touched on earlier about the fans need to get the team up, the teams need to get the fans up. If it also starts very flat and slow paced again, all of that is done for nothing and it's forgotten about. And then all of a sudden, he's crap. He don't want to be here. He's off in the summer. So I think it's a responsibility for both the players and the fans to try and lift themselves and get an atmosphere going. And I think it's the realization is this is a massive, massive game. I'm talking about the playoffs now. This is massive. It's a big, big game. We'll have a chance to get, to where we all want to be back in the Premier League. So, it's a bit of a group responsibility. But we've all been at home games. We've all been at home games when the Stadium Light can be absolutely rocking. The Sheffield United playoff game years ago, the Mags games when we won the 3 of the 6 in a rows there. It was absolutely rocking, but sometimes it's a really, really crap place to be. And if a flat Stadium of Light is a really bad, it's bad. It's a bad place for the players to be. It's a bad place for fans to be. So, yeah, I think it's just a group. Everyone's just got to get on board with it because otherwise we can be our own worst enemies at home.
Mm. What do you reckon, Martin? Are you as concerned as I am about this?
No, I am. what I'm pondering here is like, why is it? Because if you look at it completely objectively, right, we are, as we've talked about in previous weeks, obviously fourth in the table. We've given the three other clubs with the three clubs with parachute payments a really good run for the money this season. We've probably outperformed all of our expectations that we had in the summer in terms of how we're going to play, where we're going to finish. We've got a squad that is, one of the most exciting young squads I've ever seen as a Sunderland supporter. You've got generational talent in there with the likes of Bellingham and Rig and, other players like Mayenda coming through. We've got such a likeable, good, strong core group of players. We haven't got the players who are coming and taking the piss on big money contracts who are seeing Sunderland as a retirement home. We've got a good manager who's kind of got the team well structured and, yes, you can talk about performances, which, I think style of play probably comes into it to some extent. But like, why is there a feeling of negativity? If you kind of look at it purely objectively and take a step back, there's actually no reason for it because we've got so many positive things going on around the club. And, I think I said, I can't remember who the podcast that we were on, maybe it was with Gordon Armstrong or with Martin Smith recently. To me, this is a massive like sliding doors moment in Sunderland's, history. Because if we go up with this group of players, it could be like a one that we look back on and think, thank God we went up with them because otherwise we would have lost this player, that player, the other player. If we don't go up, again, the chances are that we'll see 5, 6, 7 of them go out the door and a big turnover of personnel. And I just don't get, the big, broad scale negativity. Yes, look, all of us aren't happy with, results or performances at the minute. I don't think anybody's sitting here going, it's a great set of results that we're on at the minute, great set of form that we're on going to playoffs. I'm really chuffed with how we're playing. Like, nobody's saying that, but you're kind of going, why is that negativity kind of pervading through everything that is good and eroding everything that's good? Because, from my perspective looking at it, it can only be the style of play. Is that the thing, or do you think there's something else?
I think it's a results game, and I think that's what the issue is. And fans are very emotional, and we see the results of the last few games. That's why I do think on next Saturday it's such a big game against QPR, because as you said, Mark, we have got a really, really good team. We've got some exceptionally good players, and there was a couple of minutes in the second half yesterday, and it was around the 60th minute, and I actually thought, oh, for God's sake, I've got to talk about this tomorrow, and then. We had a couple of minutes where also we looked really sharp. I mean, really good. It was literally like 2-3 minutes. It wasn't long. And I think, there is really good players in this team. And we should be doing better. We should be ripping teams apart. And obviously, we do the predictor thing for the site. And I'm obviously bottom of the league because I keep predicting we're going to smash everyone. And I feel like this team should be doing that. Some of the players we've got are exceptional. And I say, if we don't go up, we're going to lose a load of them because they're that good. They should be in the Premier League. So, I think watching yesterday, it was, I really say about the style of play, it was really slow. It was really slow. Luke O'Nien's got the ball and Patrick Roberts on the right-hand side, absolutely open. And instead of the ball going straight to him, a bit more direct and a bit of a quick play, it goes to Metham. It goes to Hugh. It goes up the lines of Roberts. And it's all this, it's so slow all the time. And it was, so it's not exciting. You almost feel like the players, take the shackles off, like we did at the start of the season where we were energetic, we were on people. Injuries haven't helped. I think when we get like some Mundell back, who's a very exciting player, that will help. But I say, that's why I just think, we just need to say, take the handbrake off and actually try and properly beat teams and let these players express themselves properly instead of playing it in themselves the whole time.
I suppose when you consider that we've, again, as we've said repeatedly here, as we've purposely dropped off in terms of intensity, obviously, I think it was Martin mentioned before, Isidore earlier in the season possibly would have got on the end of that long ball. And, he's at the back of his mind, he's thinking, if I really stretch myself here, I could tear a hamstring. That's going to be in their minds. And I do wonder, Martin, whether when we get to the playoffs, we are going to just see this like, you know, everyone's pressing from the front and sprinting all over the park. And I'm wondering whether that's the sort of the end game with this, is that, we've definitely stepped off, and nobody can say otherwise. But I do wonder, by the time we get to the playoffs, are we going to see a team like the one Brett talked about at the start of the season that was just really energetic and you know, pressing from the front? And is that going to surprise people? You know, the teams are going to, you know, looking at our recent games and preparing to play Sunderland and looking, bloody hell, they look slow, they look lethargic all over the park. And, you know, we spring a surprise and all of a sudden we're all over them like a rash. Do you see that coming, or is it more? Are you more looking at it and thinking we're actually going to be a bit more methodical, like we've probably been most of the season?
I think it's wishful thinking to a large extent, like, isn't it? And look, that's the dream, right? We're kind of all going, what if a completely different Sunderland side turns up?
It's the master plan by Le Bris. Everyone's been put into a false sense of security.
The last 42 games have just been about lulling everybody else into a really false sense of security. But no, look, I said to Chris the other day, like, anybody who thinks we're going to come out and be a completely different team in the playoffs is dreaming, because it's not going to happen. I just can't see a way in which it happens, because if we were able to do it and able to do it well, you know, we would have seen it more. I think we did see it to some extent earlier in the season, but actually, again, I think I made this point the other day. I actually don't think our style of play has changed that much over the course of the season. I think teams who we've played against have got a little bit smarter to it and haven't played around the back as much, which has enabled us has not enabled us to press. I think the biggest example of it was the Sheffield Wednesday game, wasn't it? The first home game of the season, where they were faffing about with it at the back and we were on top of them and we were able to just nick the ball off them and score goals. Really, I think there's not many teams have enabled us to do. I think like Cardiff did it at Stadium Light not so long ago. For about the first 20 minutes we were trying it, we were all over them, and then they changed how they were doing it completely. So I actually think teams are wised up to us, and we've not then had a good answer to the challenge that we kind of had to face then. You know, the thing that does give me hope, if you're looking for a bit of hope, and I know it's a very, very small little bit of evidence, but like those first 5 minutes of Bristol City, I thought we looked brilliant. And I thought we set off with real intent and purpose. We were closing people down. We were getting Lafay on the ball and he was dictating things. And I, started watching that in the early stage. I've been going, all right, this is the blueprint for how we're going to play away in the playoffs. And then, of course, Trey Hume's red card kind of changed all that, and we had to defend for 85 minutes. So, I'm kind of clinging on to that type of approach more than anything else.
We're talking about positive, Martin. You've mentioned 5 minutes against Bristol City, and I mentioned 2 minutes against Oxford.
Hey, we might get to 45 minutes if we keep going, might we?
Just keep adding to each game.
I think that's probably a good place to end it, fellas. Thank you very much. We've certainly tried to get our heads around this, anyways. that's the best I can say. It's
difficult, isn't it? Because you kind of, if you're looking for other positives as well to go off in a slight time, like Serkin's obviously come back in. I thought he looked sharp, and his return will be very beneficial for the side as a whole. Mayender obviously wasn't playing against Oxford, and he's got to come back in. I think Isidore's looked bloody awful in the last few weeks, hasn't he? So there are players to come back, but hopefully this week is a massive reset for everybody. We can, as a group of supporters, we can look at what we can add positively to the whole mix of things, and slagging players off left, right, and centre is not going to have any positive impact on us getting promoted. And all of us want the same thing. That from the manager to the owners to the fans to the players, all of us want to get promoted, and all of us have to do whatever we can to contribute to that goal. And hopefully over the next 2.5, 3, 4 weeks, however long we've got, we're all kind of bringing what we can to help that, because ultimately, if we can do it, then we're all going to be pretty bloody happy come the end of May, aren't we?
Yes. Well, we'll see. I'm like I say, I'm hoping this week is a little bit more positive. We get loads of really good vibes coming back from Portugal, and the lads go into the QPR game full of beans and give people a reason to be excited. I mean, you know, just to finish off, like what Brett said before, it is a results game, and you know, if we beat QPR 2 or 3-0, all of a sudden
changes things. Yeah,
absolutely.
changes things.
The world's a better place.
It is.
Let's hope so. Anyways, that'll be it from us today. We've got pods coming out of our ears, so make sure you subscribe if you're not already. We will have probably another 3 or 4 leading up to that QPR game, so get subscribed to Howie the Podcast. Thank you very much, Martin. Cheers, mate.
Thank you, mate.
Cheers, Brett. Thanks for coming on, brother, and thank you for getting through this with that cold, which you've managed to mask very well, putting yourself on mute. We much appreciate it.
Pleasure. Nice to be back on.
Yeah, cheers to the listeners. Thank you for listening in. Like I say, we've got pods coming pretty much every day this week, so get subscribed. We'll catch you on the next one.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.